the climate crisis is one of the biggest challenges that we face both here and around the world. So given that need, it's really about how do we go about financing that. And we kind of see there's two core parts to it. There's both the need to increase public investment in order to spear green projects, but we also need to redirect the huge amounts of private finance that are currently going towards fossil fuels and dangerous activities. But it's not all doom and gloom. I think, there's a lot of that going around, and really what kind of wanted to give a bit of a whistle-stop tour of today was some proposals that we do see that kind of positive opportunities for us to actually turn things around and generate a huge amount of funding that we could redirect towards funding a just green transition. We could green the Bank of England's collateral framework. It's introducing a digital pound. And then thirdly, what I wanted to highlight is the National Wealth Fund.
I'm Sean Benstead. I'm a researcher at CLES, the Centre for Local Economic Strategies. The community wealth building is part of the solution to this. Large anchors like councils spend billions of pounds on goods and services. Community wealth building aims to redirect that money. And these funds can be used to invest in local priorities such as, again, affordable housing, community-owned renewable energy and retrofit projects rather than destructive commercial fossil fuel industries. So what the hell has this got to do with just transition? A community wealth building approach to just transition is important because it ensures that green infrastructure projects benefit local people and planet rather than the wants and needs of international private capital. And it can serve to build local buy-in, which is crucial to make it a success particularly at a time where climate denialist politics gains ground and popularity. The Oldham Green New Deal is a council-led initiative aimed at decarbonising the local energy system through the delivery of £5 billion worth of green infrastructure, while ensuring that the economic and social benefits from that infrastructure serve the community rather than distant shareholders, increasing the number of well-paid green jobs in the most deprived communities and improving the quality of life for local residents. And finally, the Green New Deal embeds community-led energy planning methodology into developing the project pipeline itself. So there we put local residents from low-income neighbourhoods in the driving seat when planning where and how energy systems are developed.
I'm Chloe. I'm a core group member of Climate Emergency Manchester. Activism that's focused on local authorities perhaps isn't the flashiest, hasn't always been the most popular focus for climate action, but we think it's important. One of the reasons that local authorities are in a difficult position and haven't been able to make as much progress on climate action is the UK is sort of stuck in a kind of grant handout model of funding. The fact that you can't plan long term, when we've looked into climate action things, a number of things that we've seen that have been kind of pilots or even things that have done good work. An example would be a project called Ignite, which did some green space and green infrastructure developments around Greater Manchester. Good project, still project-based, still dependent in this instance on the European Commission. So if you're actually trying to plan long term, this sort of grant model doesn't help at all. We also know from campaigns around green space, just down the road at the moment, the Save Rosebank Fields campaign are running another event. And those are always really good examples of when it's a campaign that matters to people. It isn't that the planning system is too complicated. In fact, a change that's happening near to you is often, I can think of many people, that's been their sort of entry point to getting really stuck in to processes that it might be told are kind of too complicated or you don't work for local authorities. So if we've seen that with things like planning, we've seen it like with scrutiny committees, why not with finance, which each year representatives from Manchester Airport, irony of ironies, come to the part of the Manchester Council committee that talks about climate, and they sort of they defend their position and they talk about sustainable aviation fuels and everything they're doing. But the questions are not very rigorous. They're very softball. No one's trying to rethink the model. There's not much scrutiny. They think about ways in which we can have greater community involvement around things about finance, like the F word shouldn't be something where we say that's not for citizens. They can just do things to do with parks and recycling. I've seen evidence that that's not the case, so we just need to think about how to make it happen.
I work at the University of Bristol. If you want to follow up with any of these conversations we're having tonight, I am the only Alix Dietzel on the internet. They said about 71% of vehicles already meet the air quality rules, but even with only 30% of cars being affected, they've raised a lot of money. So in the first year, it raised £26 million, literally out of thin air, as we said earlier, which is brilliant. And now that money is being reinvested into just transition, so particularly in terms of transportation. So just earlier this year, it was announced that Bristol City Council will use £5 million to fund 3 bus routes. And importantly, those bus routes connect neighbourhoods that were previously unconnected. So a reinvestment. And as an avid cyclist, I'm also happy to see that money being invested in cycle routes. And one example I wanted to highlight for Bristol was Ambition Lawrence Weston, which is a collaboration between the University of Bristol and Lawrence Weston, which is an area of Bristol, where they discovered that actually a lot of the blocks to getting new green skills for people in that neighborhood was that they couldn't easily travel to places where they could get those new green skills. So they set up a new community hub, which is called Ambition House, which you can see here in the picture, and people can get direct training for green skills where they are placed. In Lawrence Weston, the Housing Association has a pipeline of local retrofit work that's planned. And that makes people feel motivated to learn those skills because they know there's a job in the pipeline. And they can do it where they live, so they don't have to worry about Bristol's terrible transportation system. It's also the Bristol City Council and the ethical investment platform Abundance, where residents and businesses can actually invest in green energy projects and they can make a return on it. So you can see some of the details here. It's about energy efficiency. You can put in as little as £5 or more, there's no upper limit. And there's some really good terms on this investment, and it's a way for you to kind of be part of just transition and finance it with as little as £5, which is brilliant. And many people who work in the environment sector, including myself, are middle class or above. And this is not great when you're trying to make decisions for everyone in society. And if you don't make those decisions in an inclusive way, you get backlash. So I put Bristol example of backlash at the moment is the liveable neighbourhood scheme.
Hi everybody, it's really nice to be here. We talk about abundance because the common perception because of the economy that we've got is that there is a lot of scarcity. And the scarcity exists because of profit extraction, not because of scarcity. And so we want to position a different kind of future. What we're talking about with public commons partnerships is this idea that it already happens with co-housing projects that have been around for a long time. The surplus that they've generated over time, they actually hold in bank accounts. So there's hundreds of thousands of pounds in cooperatives already, and they don't know where to spend it. So a bit like the Community Energy Fund that you were talking about, Alix, with Lawrence Weston, where should we put this money? So the more these projects are linked up, and the more that they are given credibility and invested in, then they start linking with each other, and then they start lending to each other, and then you have this self-expansion of the commons, as we like to call it. That example that you gave about the National Wealth Fund, which is like we're using public money to de-risk it for the private sector, we really should be using that money to invest in community-led solutions, not de-risking it for the private sector, who will then come along and extract the profit, and then that money goes nowhere else. If we invest it in the community project, then over time that money will be reinvested in communities. So in conventional development, your money in is public money, de-risking it for private finance, and then something's designed as a commercial development or infrastructure project that maximises the profit for private investors. Private investors will, by law they have to, it's mandatory to maximise their profit, but they will absolutely do that every single time. They might talk about social value, they might talk about ESG, but in the end that's what they're there for. With Abundance, we talk about public commons partnerships as an alternative to private finance initiatives, public-private finance initiatives. There's 2 projects I just wanted to talk about. This is West Mill Farm, which is a working organic farm on the Oxfordshire-Wiltshire border. Community-owned wind farm on the land, 400 people invested sums through the Community Benefit Society, and together they raised 4.5 million, which is the biggest onshore wind farm, community-owned. And then 5 years later, they put a solar cooperative together and raised £6 million from investors. But what it also enabled them to do was get a £12 million loan from the Lancashire County Pension Fund. And the pension fund thing is really interesting because they really need something that's incredibly secure and risk averse to invest their money in. And for something like renewables, it's such a steady return that it's actually quite a sure bet for them as long as they can be certain that they can rely on the company that owns the project.
There are lots of opportunities out there, and hopefully when you kind of go into conversations with your local MP or other local political representatives, you can kind of go in there with a bit more confidence and a few more examples of what is actually possible. And particularly as institutions like the National Wealth Fund continue to develop, there may be a lot of opportunities for local governments and councils and authorities to bid for more of those funds.